I have played a ton of games with Regidrago, testing all the important matchups, and I'm stoked to bring to you my Regidrago vstar Masterclass. What's up everyone, Smart TCG here, and today we're going to be diving into everything that you need to know about one of the most hyped up decks currently in the standard format. If you're looking to play this deck in the future, then this is the video for you. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and make sure to hit that notification bell so you know when more videos like this go live. Alright, let's dive right into it. Starting off, we have the main Pokemon in the deck, Regidrago vstar. Regidrago vstar has the attack Apex Dragon that allows you to copy any of your dragon type Pokemon's attacks in the discard. This is an incredibly versatile attack that allows you to utilize some of the most powerful dragon Pokemon in the game. However, it can be difficult to get these dragon type Pokemon into the discard pile. Thankfully, we have Regidrago vstar's V-Star power, Legacy Star. Legacy Star discards the top 7 cards of the deck, and in return, you get to select 2 of any cards out of the discard pile and put them back into your hand. However, for quite some time, Regidrago vstar has remained a pretty mediocre card. That all changes with its newest partner, Teal Mask Ogerpon. Next up, we have Teal Mask Ogerpon. Teal Mask Ogerpon has only been legal in the standard format for a very short time, but has already made its mark. Seen play in Raging Bolt and Regidrago, it seems to be the best Ogerpon from Twilight Masquerade. Its ability Teal Dance allows you to attach a Grass Energy card from your hand onto this Pokemon, and in return allows you to draw a card. This card allows you to get that extra energy that you need onto the field to then use something like an energy switch to move it to the Regidrago, and also allows you to draw that extra card, which boosts the consistency of this deck. This card is also a pretty powerful attacker with its Myriad Leaf Shower, dealing 30+30 for each energy attached to both active Pokemon. This card is a very powerful attacker against decks that are weak to grass, most importantly the Charizard matchup and also Roaring Moon. Sometimes Regidrago can't reach knockouts against those two decks, which will oftentimes leave the Teal Mask the opportunity to be the star in that matchup, being able to one-shot them over and over and over again. That extra draw support and the energy is what truly makes Regidrago work, and without this card, I couldn't see the deck functioning the way it does. Next up, let's hop into Regidrago's support system. First up, we have the main attacker in the deck, Dragapult. Dragapult EX has that Phantom Dive attack that deals 200 damage to the active and puts 6 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way that you like. This attack is incredibly powerful in a heavy setup-based format with decks like Charizard, Gardevoir, and Dragapult, all requiring time to set up their board, which start off with plenty of liable low HP Pokemon that Dragapult can snipe off the board. Phantom Dive spread damage is also great at setting up damage on the bench to take knockouts with Giratina vstar's Lost Impact. Dragapult is a fantastic attacker and is going to be the main one that you use in the majority of situations. However, there are also plenty of other really powerful attackers that work really well in specific matchups that we're going to hop into right now. Next up, we have Goodra vstar. Goodra vstar isn't used in every matchup, but when it is, it packs quite a punch. Its attack Rolling Iron deals 200 damage and reduces your opponent's damage done to this Pokemon by 80 on the next turn. This essentially makes your Regidrago always able to take at least one hit in most matchups. This attacker is specifically good against matchups like Lugia vstar, the Ancient Toolbox matchup, Mirror Match, and also Miraidon EX. The last dragon type attacker that we have is Giratina vstar. Giratina vstar is going to be your one-shot threat versus most EX in vstar Pokemon. If playing against a Pokemon with higher than 280 HP, look to use that Phantom Dive first to soften up that Pokemon that's on the bench before using Lost Impact to take that big knockout. Now, you might be wondering, why Giratina vstar over something like Raging Bolt? The main reason is that Giratina is not a risk to start at the beginning of the game, as it is a Stage 1 Pokemon. Starting something like the Raging Bolt can be game losing, as this list does not play Penny. In most circumstances, Giratina is also just the more efficient attacker. So those are a couple of reasons as to why I personally like the Giratina. Yes, something like the Raging Bolt can hit, for 300 or 400 damage. However, in most situations, you don't actually have to deal that much damage, and when you do, have to knock out something, maybe like a Dragapult, for example, you can simply use your Phantom Dive first to get a little bit of damage, and then you can use the Giratina late game to finish off those damaged Pokemon that you used on the Dragapult to soften up. Alrighty everyone, here is the list that we have currently constructed. We got ourselves the 4-3 Regidrago, pretty standard there. You want to play 4 Regidrago so you can find them consistently on those early turns. We got 4 Teal Mask as well for consistency. Consistency is king, so having 4 Teal Mask feels quite nice. When something like the Kyurem comes out soon, then you potentially might want to cut one of those Teal Masks for the Kyurem, so that could be a potential cut moving forward when the brand new set Shrouded Fable comes out. We got 2 of the Dragapult as well. You want to play 2 of these as this is going to be the main attacker in the majority of games, whereas things like the Goodra and the Giratina you're not going to be using in every single situation, so you don't necessarily need to play 2 of those cards. We got the 1 Regidrago vstar as well with that Rolling Iron, 1 Mew EX with that Restart, 1 Giratina vstar, and then the 1 of Hawlucha. For supporters, pretty standard here. We got 4 Professor's Research, 3 Boss's Orders, and then 2 Iono as well. No other types of supporters, just straight into the point, simple and consistent. For the item cards here, we got 4 Energy Switch, 4 of the Earthen Vessel, 4 Ultra Ball, 4 Nest Ball, a lot of 4-ups. Consistency is king. This is a deck that is a very heavy combo based deck, so playing as consistent of a build as possible is very, very important. 2 Superior Energy Retrieval as well. This is a deck that dumps a lot of energies, so being able to get those back is very, very important. 1 Switch as well for that flexibility, 1 Prime Catcher, 1 Pokestop as well. Some lists haven't been actually playing the Pokestop, however, I have actually liked it quite a bit. Just a little bit more, consistency. You can burn through your deck a little bit more as well. So I've been liking the Pokestop personally. 1 Super Rod as well, just for more resource recovery, especially with a deck that burns so much. Being able to Super Rod cards back can be very, very nice. And then we got 9 Grass Energy and 3 Fire to round out the list. This is a list that I've been currently playing games with. It's been a lot of fun. All right, let's hop into exactly how you should be playing versus some of the best decks in the format. First up, we have Regidrago versus Charizard. Charizard is surging again in popularity, and this is a critical matchup to learn how to play against. All right, let's hop right into it. Here is a board state that I typically like to have in this matchup. 2 cards that I pulled out and put to the side were Dragapult and Hawlucha. These 2 cards are going to be absolutely critical in the Charizard matchup, the Dragapult matchup, and also the Gardevoir matchup. Your goal is to quickly use Prime Catcher or Boss's Orders and force a situation where you can wipe 2 Charmanders off the board before they get set up with the Phantom Dive. In the early turns, it's hard for Zard to get more than 2 Charmanders without jeopardizing the rest of their setup. However, if they are able to get more than 2 of the Charmanders out, then focus on taking out their support system like their Pidgeys and their Bidoops. Without Pidgeot or Bibarel on their side of the board, their deck really starts to fall apart towards the late game. Oftentimes also, towards the late game, you can use that Teal Mask because you are able to hit weakness on Charizard. Charizard is a dark type that is weak to grass Pokemon, so as long as you have 3 grass energies on the Teal Mask, you're going to be able to one-shot those Charizards for 360 damage. Alrighty, here are a couple of important Charizard matchup notes. Use the Dragapult plus Hawlucha to KO 2 Charmander at the beginning of the game. If they only get down 2 of the Charmanders and you are able to pull this off, you should be able to win very convincingly. Teal Mask is a strong finishing Pokemon as well to finish off that final Charizard at the end of the game. Being able to hit for weakness is very, very nice. Focus on the setup Pokemon first rather than something like the Rotom. Yes, it might be tempting to take the big 3 prize lead. However, you run into some situations where when you go down from 6 to 3 on the second turn of the game, you run into some spots where they could hit you maybe with something like an Unfair Stamp paired up with something like the Defiant Span and hit you for 300, and then there's a chance you don't necessarily have a response. So focus on the Rotom, maybe on that 3rd or 4th turn of the game. You don't have to knock it out super, super quickly. Overall, I think this matchup is 60-40. I think this matchup is relatively solid. You just have so many ways to shut them down, so many things that you can do that cause a lot of problems for them. So I think the matchup is relatively decent. All right. Next up, we're going to hop into another really important matchup. One of the most popular decks in the format, one that everyone should know how to play against. Let's hop right into it. Next up, we have Gardevoir EX. In many people's eyes, the best deck in the format. It has been dominating the standard format for quite some time. Let's hop into how to tame arguably the best deck in the format. An incredibly similar strategy to Charizard EX, you want to focus on trying to wipe their board quickly with cards like Dragapult EX and Hawlucha. Goodra as well can be a powerful attacker once they establish a full board, making it difficult for them to take a big one-hit knockout with something like the Drifloon. If they're able to survive the early turns of the game, look to set up damage on a Gardevoir EX with Phantom Dive to set up a Boss's Orders or Prime Catcher to knock it out with Giratina V-Star's Lost Impact. Here are some important Gardevoir matchup notes. Dragapult plus Hawlucha to KO 2 routes early is best case scenario, kind of similar to the Charizard matchup where if you can pull this off, you oftentimes can just run them over. Dragapult damage can be put onto Kirlias as well to set up Giratina V-Star knockout on a future Gardevoir EX. You want to make sure to bench Mew EX late game to prevent hand disruption plays from beating you. If they attack with something like the Drifloon, you can gust around it and attack with Phantom Dive, knocking out the active Pokemon and the Drifloon as well. I've had many situations where you can pull off big 3 prize turns with that play. Overall, I think this matchup is very, very close. I think that you are slightly favored, about 55-45, but it can definitely go either way. But I do think that you typically have the slight edge in this matchup. Next up, we have Lugia V-Star. Despite its relatively mediocre performances recently in major tournaments, it still is a threat in this format with just how powerful it can get when it gets functioning. Let's hop into exactly how you should tackle this matchup. Below are a couple of attackers you should focus on using. In this matchup, you want to focus on using Prime Catcher or Boss's Orders to bring up either Archeops or Cinccino to knock out with Goodra V-Star's Rolling Iron. The only way Lugia is able to knock you out is with Cinccino, so removing their energy engine or just the threat itself can really push them back in the game. You can use things like Dragapult to set up damage on Pokemon to knock out later. However, that does not come up all the time, especially if they attach something like the Mist Energy to prevent that play from happening. Giratina V-Star's Lost Impact can be the finishing move on Lugia V-Star, as typically in the early and middle portion of the game, you are looking to take down the engine of the deck or the big one-shot threat, which oftentimes leaves the Lugia sitting on the field that eventually you're going to have to deal with, and that's something that Giratina can do perfectly. Alrighty, here are some Lugia matchup notes to remember. Use Prime Catcher or Boss's Orders to knock out Archeopsis or Cinccino's with Rolling Iron at the beginning of the game. To finish the game off, oftentimes you can use things like Giratina V-Star to knock out Lugia V-Star, Ursaluna, or Iron Hands. Try to set your goal around eliminating Archeopsis and Cinccino's with Rolling Iron, as that is the only way that they can easily take knockouts, and then focus on things like Lugia towards the end of the game. Overall, I think this matchup is slightly favored. Lugia is a deck that can, set up super well and just, kind of run you over. However, that doesn't necessarily happen all the time, as the deck does have some consistency problems. So overall, I think you're slightly favored in this matchup, and it's definitely a matchup that I would make sure to test out if you do plan to play this deck. However, if you do use these tips, I think you'll be just okay. Next up, we have the Lost Zone Toolbox matchup. Lost Zone Toolbox most recently won the North American International Championships and is poised to dominate for the foreseeable future. Despite Kyurem being released in Shrouded Fable, I expect this deck to adjust and still be a major threat moving forward. Let's hop into exactly how you should be tackling the Lost Zone Toolbox matchup. Below are some of the main attackers you want to focus on using when playing versus the Lost Zone Toolbox matchup. Dragapult EX's Phantom Dive is going to be the main way that you take knockouts. Lost Zone focuses on so many low HP Pokemon to function and attack with. Dragapult becomes an absolutely devastating Pokemon for them to deal with. Hawlucha is also great as well, as it's able to set up double knockouts on Comfey. If they ever attempt to attack with Iron Thorns, Iron Hands, or the Blood Moon Ursaluna, or honestly any other higher HP Pokemon, you can easily deal with those with Giratina V-Star's Lost Impact. When it comes to spreading damage with Phantom Dive in situations where you're not taking a knockout on a bench Pokemon, make sure to be careful where you put that damage, as Switch Cart can remove that damage off the bench. So make sure that you're putting that damage in a way that will prevent them from removing all of it. Here are some matchup notes on how to approach the Lost Zone Toolbox matchup. Like I said, make sure to use Dragapult as that main attacker. When you're using Dragapult's Phantom Dive, make sure to manipulate the damage on the bench. in a way that prevents them from fully healing it off with Switch Card. Giratina V-Star is going to be used to deal with high HP Pokemon. Focus on their support system as well over weak attackers like Cramorant or Sableye. Yes, it might be tempting to take those out. However, focus on wiping their Comfies off the field first, and then you can deal with those attackers, because Cramorant and Sableye aren't necessarily trading relatively well versus a deck that can take 2 to 3 prize cards in one turn. So you don't necessarily have to worry about them too much. Overall, I think this matchup is 60-40 for Regidrago. Regidrago definitely is going to have a good time versus Lost Zone Toolbox, as long as you're able to get set up. Moving on, we have the Dragapult EX matchup. Dragapult EX, although performing relatively mediocrely at the North American International Championships, actually has a relatively solid matchup spread right now, and is definitely a deck to watch out for moving forward. Let's hop into how to approach the matchup. To be brutally honest, this matchup plays incredibly similar to the Charizard matchup, so I'm not going to repost the same image on the board state that you want. In this matchup, you do basically what they want to do faster most of the time. Both decks are trying to achieve the first big Dragapult attack, and your deck is more explosive and able to do that more consistently. You can use Hawlucha plus Phantom Dive to wipe multiple Dreepies off the board, and if they are able to play around that and they get 3 on the board, look to target their support Pokemon like Pidgey and the Bidoof instead. If they set up the multiple Dragapult, you can set up their bench Dragapult with Phantom Dive to be knocked out by Giratina V-Star later on. I think this matchup overall is relatively slightly favored. You pretty much are able to do what they want to do, just a little bit more quicker and more consistently, which is why I think this matchup is about 55-45. Next up, we have the Chien-Pao EX matchup. Chien-Pao EX has been a deck that many people write off, but continues to come back and show that it is still a relatively solid deck right now in the format, and is something that you should know how to play against. All right, let's dive into exactly how you should be tackling this matchup. Below are some of the most important cards that you want to use in this matchup. Dragapult is going to be your main attacker in this matchup, as you want to continuously chase Baxcaliburs on the bench with Prime Catcher or Boss's Orders, and then use Phantom Dive over and over again. This matchup entirely comes down to your ability to knock out their support Pokemon quickly with Phantom Dive. If you're able to, you should be able to do just fine in this matchup. Continuously using your Boss's Orders and your Prime Catcher to chase down the Baxcalibur, take out also the Frigibax as well with that extra 60 damage is going to be critical to slowing them down. If they're able to get multiple Baxcalibur set up, this matchup can become relatively rough. However, your goal is to prevent that, and if you are able to, which you most of the time should be able to, matchup is relatively solid. It's just about getting to that point, and can you get there? Here are a couple Chien-Pao matchup notes. Focus on taking out Baxcalibur with Phantom Dive. Ideally, pair that knockout of a Baxcalibur with a knockout of a Frigibax. If they bench the 70 HP Frigibax, you can use the Hawlucha to get that 10 on there, so you can wipe them both off the field. You can attempt a prize race with something like the Giratina, but that can be relatively difficult, as they are able to reload the energies onto the field much more efficiently than you can. Focus on their engine rather than their attacker. Once their engine falls, you win the game pretty much regardless. You don't necessarily have to worry about something like that Chien-Pao, because if they don't have a Baxcalibur, that Chien-Pao is not something to worry about. So focus on the engine rather than the attacker. Very, very important. Overall, I think this matchup is about 55-45. It can definitely swing one way or the other, but definitely a solid matchup as long as you're able to get going. I will say the coin flip is really, really important. I think if you get to go first, I think you are definitely favored 55-45. However, if they go first and they get the explosive setup, I could definitely see them being slightly favored in those situations. However, I still think the matchup is very, very close if you're going second. Overall, I think it's just slightly favored. The last matchup we're going to talk about today is the Raging Bolt matchup. Despite Raging Bolt performing relatively poorly in events recently, I still expect the deck to see play, and I think it is relatively decent in this format. Let's dive into exactly how to tackle this matchup. Admittedly, this matchup can be relatively difficult, as they are able to knock you out consistently, and things like Regidrago vstar aren't always able to slow them down. But here are a couple of routes that I have came up with that can help you make that matchup a little bit better. Gudra paired up with Hawlucha is enough to knock out things like the Teal Mask, so you can attempt to wall them with the Rolling Iron as long as you are able to use a Boss's Orders or Prime Catcher to knock out the Teal Mask with that Rolling Iron. The other play that you can do is attack with Phantom Dive into the Raging Bolt, and then Prime Catcher the Raging Bolt that you put the damage counters on from Phantom Dive on the previous turn and wipe them both off the field. This play does not always work though, as they are able to easily set up a third Raging Bolt, so that's kind of a problem that makes this matchup relatively difficult at times. So it is best if you do try and make that play to pair that up with a hand disruption card and hope that they are able to find that third Raging Bolt to knock out. You can also attempt to prize race them with something like the Regidrago vstar, but admittedly it is really hard to streamline 3 Regidragos back to back to back when they are just able to knock you out over and over and over again very easily. So overall, I think this matchup is relatively scary. However, those are a couple of plays that you can make to make the matchup a little bit closer. Here are a couple important Raging Bolt matchup notes. Hawlucha plus the Gudra KO on a Teal Mask makes it difficult for them to respond knockout in some situations. You oftentimes can chase that Teal Mask, maybe take off a Grass Energy or 2 from the field, but also take away a draw support Pokemon as well. And if they do miss the knockout, you can definitely swing the games back into your favor. You can attempt a prize race with something like the Regidrago vstar. However, it is pretty difficult to streamline 3 Regidrago when they can one-shot you turn after turn. The last play that you can sometimes make is the 4 prize Dragapult turn if they're out of switch cards. The problem with this play is if you go and you hit the active for the 200 damage, you put 40 or 60 damage onto the bench Raging Bolt, and then they can respond with multiple switch cards. They can heal themselves out of that range, or like if they play something like the Bravery Charm, they can kind of make that play not actually work. So that play is kind of a very, very risky play to make, and you should really only be making it if you know that they don't have many switch cards left, or you know that they don't play something like the Bravery Charm. So that's very, very risky. Overall, I think the matchup is about 40-60. Definitely is not one of your strongest matchups. However, if you are able to use some of these plans that I have, kind of devised, I definitely think that you can win the matchup and make it relatively close. However, though, it's not a matchup that I would be necessarily super excited to play against moving forward. You could play something like Penny and also the Noivern to make the matchup, somewhat slightly better. However, then like the Noivern isn't necessarily good versus a lot of very popular matchups currently right now in the standard format, so you kind of make your deck inherently worse versus a lot of other things. So that's kind of the reason as to why I don't include the Noivern. And Raging Bolt isn't necessarily the most popular deck as of right now, so I've decided not to deck for it. Alrighty, everyone, I'm just gonna quickly kind of talk about typically how I like to kind of sequence some of these early game turns, typically how I like to approach certain situations. So starting off here, I have myself a Teal Mask. I also have a couple of Grass Energies in my hand. I'm going to draw for turn here. Now, something that is, pretty, I think, important to make sure that you remember, this is just, kind of an important sequencing tip in the majority of situations when you have a nest ball here, right? Like here it is. So we have a nest ball. So there's multiple different things that we want with this nest ball. For example, we would want maybe something like another Regidrago V, maybe something like a Mewtwo X, maybe another Teal Mask Ogerpon. We want multiple different cards with this nest ball. Typically in these situations, you want to attach first, draw for turn, because if you, let's say off that Teal Mask, find maybe another Teal Mask, then you can use that nest ball for maybe something else like a Mewtwo X or Regidrago. And if you use the Teal Mask, draw one, and you find something else, then you can ball search for the other Pokemon that you're looking for. So that's just kind of an important thing that you typically want to make sure that you are keeping an eye on. Is typically in these situations is going to happen a lot with a deck like this. You want to draw first with the Teal Mask, see exactly what you get and then use your ball search cards. For example, as well, something like the Ultra Ball, you're going to be put in situations where, you have the option to play the Ultra Ball first. Usually using something like the Teal Mask first to draw a card is typically in most situations going to be significantly stronger, because let's say you Teal Mask, you draw that card, and then you find maybe something like a Dragapult or something like a Giratina or a Gudra, something that you can use the Ultra Ball to throw like into the discard pile that can be relatively good. So, just, kind of making sure, I think that's one of the most important sequencing tips with this deck is oftentimes when you have the option to Teal Mask first or play maybe a ball search card, draw, see what you get first, gives you a lot more things that you can do. So yeah, all right, I just wanted to show that off. Just was, very small there, but I definitely think it could be useful. Alrighty, last up here, I wanted to kind of go over just exactly what changes this deck is going to have heading into the brand new format with Shrouded Fable. The format pretty much is just going to stay the same, except it's going to gain a couple of brand new cards. Things like Pheasantipede are going to enter the format. We also have a Dusknoir as well. Kyurem as well is going to enter the format, and also Xerosic, but the format is not going to necessarily change entirely. However, there are some cards that you want to include. We're going to start off here with Kyurem. Kyurem is a card with that Tri-Frost attack, which you discard all energy from this Pokemon, and it does 110 damage to 3 of your opponent's Pokemon for 5 energy. If you're playing against a Lost Zone deck or any deck that has Chorus in the discard pile, that Tri-Frost attack costs only 1 colorless. However, this card can be used in a lot of matchups that don't, actually have a card that, has Chorus in the name. For example, you could be playing against a Gardevoir matchup and you could actually use the Tri-Frost attack. You could be playing against Charizard, could be playing against a Dragapult matchup, and you can still use the Kyurem's Tri-Frost attack due to Apex Dragon being able to copy one of your Dragon type's attacks for only 3 energy. You can copy this 5 energy attack for only 3. So this is a card that is immediately going to get put into this deck. The next card I also wanted to talk about was Pheasantipede. Pheasantipede with that ability, Turn the Tables. You get to use the ability if any of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn, and you get to draw 3 cards. So these are going to be 2 cards that I think are definitely going to make their way into this deck. Another card as well that makes a lot of sense to run is also going to be Canceling Cologne, because you're going to be playing up against those decks that play the Manaphy, so you want to be able to use the Canceling Cologne to turn off Manaphy's ability so you can use Tri-Frost. This card is also relatively good versus things like Snorlax, because you can turn off their block ability for a turn. It's good versus also Gardevoir as well. Pretty much anything that has Klefki or Fluttermane. I mean, it's huge, to be able to turn those cards off, in those early turns of the game. So I think Canceling Cologne is a staple moving forward. However, we have to cut a couple cards. As you can see, we're up to 62 cards now. We've already cut one of the Teal Masks. So the cards that I think you can cut, I think you can get away with cutting 1 Grass Energy. I think 8-3 is totally fine. With the Double Superior and Super Rod, I think that you can get away with that. I don't necessarily think that you need this switch card, especially if you play Cologne. You should be able to move around a little bit more, versus decks like Snorlax. You have Prime Catcher still anyways. You could potentially cut Pokestop as well if you wanted to play Switch instead, if you felt strongly about having that, but those would be the changes that I would make moving forward with the brand new set Shrouded Fable coming out. Alrighty, that is going to do it for today's video on Regidrago vstar. I hope you learned something with this video, and if you have any more questions, make sure to put them into the comments. If you enjoy this type of content and want to see more, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and make sure to turn on that notification bell so you know when my newest videos go live. But with that being said, thank you so much for all the support. As always, I appreciate it. And this is Smart TCG. I will speak with you guys again soon. Peace out, everyone.